On Christmas Eve, December 24, 1954, a supernatural event shocked the entire nation. A sudden fire trapped 5 children inside their home. The blaze was so intense that no one could reach them. After the fire burned out, investigators searched through the wreckage. What they found left everyone stunned. There were no remains of any of the children in the rubble. 5 living, breathing kids had simply vanished into thin air. The ladder beside the house had disappeared. The trucks suddenly wouldn't start. The phone line had been deliberately cut. All the evidence pointed to one terrifying conclusion. This fire was no accident. The parents were convinced their 5 children didn't die in that fire. They believed someone took them during the blaze. So what really happened? In Fayetteville, West Virginia, Jenny and George had 10 children. Their oldest son was serving in the military at the time, leaving 9 children at home to celebrate the holiday on Christmas Eve. The younger kids begged their mother to let them stay up late. Wanting to play a little longer on this special night, Jenny gave in to their request. She also reminded her 2 older sons to take care of the farm animals before bed. George and 2 of the older children had worked on the farm all day and were exhausted, so they went to bed early. At 12:30 in the morning, a mysterious phone call shattered the silence. On the other end was a strange woman's voice, calling out a name no one in the family recognized. In the background, you could hear laughter and the clinking of glasses. Clearly, the caller was at some kind of party. Jenny told her she had the wrong number, but the woman let out a strange, eerie laugh before hanging up. After putting down the phone, Jenny noticed the living room light was still on. She walked over, turned it off, drew the curtains, and went back to bed. At 1 in the morning, a loud bang jolted Jenny awake. It sounded like something heavy had slammed into the roof, followed by a rolling sound. Jenny figured the wind had just knocked something around and rolled over to go back to sleep. Half an hour later, a sharp, burning smell startled her awake. She rushed out of the bedroom and found the study filled with thick smoke. The phone line and fuse box were on fire. Jenny immediately ran to wake her husband and the children. Everyone scrambled downstairs to escape. In the end, the couple made it out with 4 of the kids. But 5 children were still trapped upstairs. The stairway to the second floor was already engulfed in flames. There was no way to get up there. George and Jenny stood below, screaming the children's names, but there was no response. To make matters worse, every rescue attempt that followed was met with bizarre obstacles. The fire was spreading fast. They had to call for help immediately. Jenny ran to the phone to dial the fire department, only to find the phone line had already been burned through. She had no choice but to run to a neighbor's house to call. A passing driver also pulled over, offering to call from a nearby tavern. 2 people went to call for help at the same time, and everyone expected the fire department to arrive quickly, but both calls ran into strange problems. The neighbor's phone suddenly malfunctioned and wouldn't connect. The tavern's phone couldn't reach the operator either. George decided to use a ladder. To climb up to the second floor windows, he ran to the side of the house to grab the ladder that had always been leaning against the wall, but the ladder was nowhere to be found. He and his son searched the entire yard. It was as if the ladder had vanished into thin air. George remembered there was a barrel of water in the yard that could be used to fight the fire. He ran over and grabbed it, only to discover the water had frozen solid. Then George thought of his work truck parked in the yard. He could drive it up to the house and climb onto the roof to reach the second floor. George jumped into the driver's seat and turned the key. The truck sputtered a few times and died completely. He ran to start the other truck. Same thing. It was beyond strange. Both trucks had been running fine just the day before. How could they both fail at the same time? The family could only stand there helplessly as the fire raged for a full 45 minutes. Eventually, the entire house collapsed in flames, reduced to nothing but rubble. The reason the fire department arrived so late was even more baffling. Reportedly, the fire chief couldn't operate the fire truck, and since it was Christmas, the truck didn't reach the scene until 8 a.m. Local police and firefighters arrived together and conducted a preliminary investigation. They consulted the coroner and concluded that the 5 children had died in the fire. The official report stated the fire was caused by faulty electrical wiring, an accident. But when search crews entered the rubble to recover the children's remains, what they found left everyone speechless. There were no remains whatsoever, not a single bone fragment from any of the 5 children. No one on the scene could believe that 5 children had burned to death there. At this point, I'm sure you have just as many questions as the people did back then. The grieving parents refused to accept the official conclusion. Too many suspicious details suggested this was far more than a simple accident. The missing remains, the eerie midnight phone call, the vanished ladder, 2 trucks that failed at the same time, a phone line that was deliberately cut. Were all these bizarre coincidences really just coincidences? Let's take a closer look at each one. The biggest red flag was the missing remains. If the 5 children really died in the fire, why wasn't there a single bone to be found? She decided to run her own experiments. She burned animal bones multiple times to see if fire could completely destroy them. Every single time, the result was the same. The bones charred, but they never fully disappeared. There were always significant remains left behind. The couple then visited a local crematorium for answers. The staff told them that a body needs to burn at 2,000 degrees for at least 2 hours. Even then, bones still leave behind substantial residue. Their house had only burned for 45 minutes, nowhere near the temperatures of a crematorium. More importantly, household appliances at the scene were still identifiable. The refrigerator, stove, and bed frames, all metal objects, were clearly visible. If the fire had truly been hot enough to incinerate 5 children's bones completely, how could those appliances still be intact? The strangest part, not a single remain was found from any of the 5 children. Statistically, that's almost impossible. The second red flag was the string of bizarre obstacles during the rescue. Why did the ladder that always leaned against the side of the house suddenly vanish? It was later found in a ditch about 150 feet away. Someone had clearly thrown it there on purpose to prevent any rescue. George's 2 trucks had both worked fine the day before. Why did they both break down at the same time? A telephone repairman carefully inspected the phone line. He confirmed it hadn't been burned by the fire. It had been deliberately cut with a tool. Cutting that line required climbing a 14-foot telephone pole and then reaching out another 2 feet. This was no accident or coincidence. It was a carefully planned act of sabotage. The official explanation was that an electrical fault caused the fire, but if that were true, the entire house would have lost power. Yet when the couple stood outside watching their home burn, the Christmas lights were still twinkling. More and more disturbing details began to surface, strengthening the couple's belief that their children were still alive. Additional eyewitness accounts started to emerge. One witness claimed to have seen someone holding an engine removal tool during the fire. Townspeople said they saw the missing children riding in a car that night. A nearby bus driver told police he saw a group of people throwing fireballs at the house that perfectly matched the loud bang Jenny had heard in the middle of the night. Months later, when the weather warmed up, a neighbor's child found a green rubber ball while playing in the yard. George recognized it immediately. It was a napalm bomb, the kind used in warfare. Then came an even more shocking testimony. A woman who ran a hotel on the edge of town said she saw the children the very next day after the fire. They arrived in a car with Florida plates. She even served the kids breakfast. The children were accompanied by 2 women and 2 men. They were all Italian. The group checked in just before midnight. The witness tried to talk to the children, but the adults were openly hostile and refused to allow any interaction. They left first thing the next morning. Speaking of Italians, this is a crucial detail. George and Jenny were both born in Italy and later immigrated to America, settling in Fayetteville, a hub for Italian immigrants. George started a trucking company there and became very successful. They were one of the most respected middle-class families in the area. But George was outspoken in his opposition to the Italian dictator Mussolini. This made him an outcast in the community. Many people distanced themselves from him, and there were even heated confrontations. The couple hired a private investigator. The detective discovered that an insurance salesman who had once threatened George was actually a member of the coroner's jury. After George had turned him down, the salesman had warned him, "Your house is going to burn to the ground. Kids will be destroyed. You're going to pay for your filthy words about Mussolini." Months before the fire, a stranger had shown up at the house, pretending to look for work. He walked around to the back of the house, pointed at 2 separate fuse boxes, and said, "These things are going to cause a fire someday." George had been puzzled at the time and even called the power company to come inspect. All these overlooked details now came flooding back, sending chills down their spines. The private investigator also learned that the fire chief claimed to have found a heart and buried it at the scene. Could this be a breakthrough? Were the children really dead after all? Were all the earlier suspicions just coincidences? Everyone was stunned by the news. The fire chief was persuaded to dig up the box and have it examined. The examiner poked at the so-called heart and determined it was a piece of beef liver, one that showed no signs of having been burned. The fire chief later confessed that there had never been any box in the fire. He had buried the beef liver in the rubble himself, hoping it would bring the family some closure. In the days that followed, clues continued to surface. In August 1949, George decided to re-examine the fire scene. The excavation was thorough, and they found several vertebrae fragments. This discovery gave them a glimmer of hope. The lab report indicated the vertebrae belonged to someone who was between 16 and 17 years old at the time of death, no older than 22. The bone maturity also exceeded that of a typical 14-year-old boy. The oldest of the missing children was only 14, and the vertebrae showed no evidence of fire damage. Would the truth behind all of this never be found? In 1968, 20 years after the fire, Jenny received an envelope with no return address. The postmark was from somewhere near Kentucky. Inside was a photo of a man in his 20s. On the back it read, "Louis Sodell, I love brother Frankie." Jenny and George believed the man bore a striking resemblance to their missing son Louis. Beyond the obvious similarities, dark curly hair and deep brown eyes, they shared the same straight nose and the same left eyebrow that tilted upward. They hired a private investigator once again and sent the photo to Kentucky for investigation, but nothing turned up. What did that mysterious photo mean? To this day, no one knows. The couple spent their entire lives pursuing this case. They doubled the reward money again and again. They put up massive billboards along the highway. They hired detectives multiple times. Some believe it was the Sicilian mafia getting revenge on George, or the children trafficked. Could someone have threatened the missing kids, warning them that contacting their family family would bring deadly consequences. In 1969, George passed away. Jenny and the surviving children continued searching for the missing five. All they wanted to know was whether those kids were still alive somewhere or had truly perished in the fire. That's where this story ends for today. I bet you really want to know the truth. So do I. But the reality is, this case remains unsolved to this day. All the bizarre elements fit together like pieces of a dark puzzle, and everything about it is deeply unsettling. Here's my personal take on it. George made his opposition to Mussolini public, and word got back to the mafia. That's what put a target on his back. The choice of Christmas Eve and a fire in the middle of the night were both carefully calculated. During the holidays, fire and emergency response is at its weakest. Every rescue tool the couple could find outside the house had been sabotaged. Someone had tampered with everything in the dead of night, and honestly, wouldn't that have been easy to pull off? The officials' sloppy handling of the case was also highly suspicious, including that mysterious photo years later. What should have been a straightforward fire investigation turned into one of America's most baffling and eerie unsolved cases. I know you all probably have a lot of thoughts on this. Head to the comments and share them. I'm sure this one's going to spark a lively discussion. If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe.